When we start talking about a man who doesn't need a lot of people around him, who doesn't rely on friendships to feel strong, we're talking about a man who has learned how to stand on his own. A man with no friends is a man who's discovered a certain type of strength and peace within himself that many folks may never find. This isn't about being cold, distant, or alone for the sake of being alone. No, this is about someone who has become secure in who he is, someone who's learned to walk his path without leaning on others to validate or reassure him. In a world where everyone's shouting to be seen, to be heard, to be liked, a man who can stand without that is someone you don't see every day. Most people are afraid of silence, afraid of solitude, afraid of their own company, because they're terrified of what they'll find. But a man who's comfortable on his own, he's someone who has spent time in that silence. He's a man who's looked in the mirror and faced what he sees, the good and the bad. He's asked himself the hard questions, the questions most of us are afraid to confront, and he's found his answers not by seeking approval from others, but by digging deep within himself. He's secure because he's not looking outward for things that can only be found inside. A man who stands alone and is at peace with it knows the strength in solitude. As Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." See, when you're alone, when it's just you and your thoughts, there's no mask, no pretending, no need to put on a show for anyone. You're stripped down to who you really are, and that's where the power is. A man who's secure in himself doesn't need people around to tell him who he is. He doesn't need constant validation, proof, or applause. He's not looking for someone else to give him permission to feel worthy. And because he's not caught up in trying to fit in or be liked, he's got the freedom to truly be himself, to grow in his own way, and to develop an unshakable confidence in who he is. Now, friendships can be a beautiful part of life. Don't get me wrong, there's value in companionship, in having someone to laugh with, to share moments with. But a secure man knows that his worth isn't determined by how many friends he has or how popular he is. He's not keeping score. He's got his eyes on the bigger picture, on a purpose that isn't swayed by social dynamics or the pressure to be a certain way just to keep people around. He's committed to his growth, his vision, and his principles. If people come along who align with that, great. But he's not out there seeking approval or trying to collect people just to avoid being alone. He knows that a man's peace can't be measured by the number of people in his corner. Solitude is his teacher, his guide. When a man has the courage to sit with himself, he learns things about who he is that he wouldn't find in a crowd. He learns about his fears, his strengths, his weaknesses, and once he's looked those parts of himself in the face, nobody can shake him. He doesn't need anyone else to fill the gaps or mask the insecurities. He's worked through them on his own. He's faced them head on, and that's what gives him his strength. As Epictetus said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. A man who embraces solitude knows this freedom and lives it. It's a strength that comes from within, not from the praise or presence of others. A secure man understands that the wrong friendships can actually weaken him. People with conflicting values, people who don't respect his boundaries, people who bring drama or unnecessary complications into his life. Those are people who will drain him, and a wise man isn't about to let himself get caught up in that. He's selective because he respects his peace too much to throw it away on relationships that aren't good for him. And sometimes that means he ends up walking a quieter path, a more solitary path. But that solitude is rich, it's purposeful, it's peaceful. A man like that, he's not without empathy or connection. He knows how to connect deeply when he chooses to, but he's not so eager to share himself with just anyone. He values his time, his energy, his mind, and he's careful about who he shares those parts of himself with. When he does let someone in, It's because they've shown they respect who he is and what he stands for. He's not interested in superficial connections. He's looking for depth, for respect, for authenticity. And if that's not on the table, he's perfectly fine keeping to himself. See, society often tries to tell us that being alone is something to be fixed, something to avoid. But a secure man knows better. He knows that sometimes standing alone is exactly what a man needs to grow, to understand his worth, to build himself up from the inside out. And when a man truly knows his worth, he doesn't fear solitude. He doesn't need a crowd. He doesn't need to fit into some mold. He's confident in his own path, in his own skin, and that makes him unshakable. This man, he stands solid because he understands that true self-respect is about what he knows to be true when he's alone, not about the noise that comes from outside. He's looked himself in the eye in moments of silence, moments of challenge, moments of truth. He's come face to face with who he is, what he's done, and where he's going. And because he's been through that kind of self-reflection, that kind of personal accountability, he's earned a respect for himself that doesn't rely on the opinions of others. It's an unshakable confidence, one that's built from the inside out, not from the fleeting approval that comes from those around him. This is a man who's walked through fire, who's been tested in ways that few will ever understand. He's had to confront his weaknesses, his regrets, his insecurities, and he's come out on the other side stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. There's no need for applause because he knows the work he's done. He doesn't need it validated by anyone else. He's not looking for praise. He's not out here trying to collect admirers or followers. He's moved past that phase in life where external validation feels like a necessity. He's come to a place of peace that only he can define, and that's what makes him secure. As Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." In today's world, that's a radical thing. Society would have you believe that your worth is tied to how many people know your name, how many people like your photos, how many people are tuned in to what you're doing. But this man has separated himself from that. He's not defined by his social circle, by how many people think he's successful, or by how many people are interested in his life. His value, his sense of self-worth, is rooted in what he knows he's accomplished, in the strength of his character, and in the path he's chosen to walk. He understands that popularity doesn't equate to fulfillment. He's secure enough to know that real value isn't something that fluctuates based on the opinions of others. It's something you carry with you quietly, with a steady heart. He's content in the quiet spaces of his life, those moments when it's just him, the silence, and his thoughts. He's not uncomfortable with his own company because he's made peace with who he is. He's working to resolve his inner conflicts. He's faced his past, acknowledged his mistakes, and learned from them. So when he's alone, he's alone. He's not haunted by regrets or unfinished business. He's at ease because he knows he's done the best he could with the hand he's been dealt. That kind of peace, that kind of contentment, doesn't come from a life filled with people. It comes from a life filled with purpose, with integrity, with a commitment to self-growth that transcends the need for outside approval. People on the outside might not understand this. They see a man without a big social circle, without a crowd around him, and they assume he must be lonely, that he must be missing something. But that kind of thinking says more about them than it does about him. It reveals a mindset that places value on appearance over substance, on perception over truth. A secure man doesn't live his life for others to understand. He's not performing for an audience. His life, his choices, his journey, those are his alone, and he's content to walk his path without the need for others to validate it. He's not avoiding people, he's just not dependent on them to define his worth. He knows that true strength is quiet. It doesn't need to be on display. It doesn't need a platform, and it doesn't need to be noticed. As Epictetus said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Real strength is like a mountain, firm, unwavering, rooted deeply in the earth. It's not moved by the wind, it's not shaken by storms. It's steady because it's grounded in something real, something internal. This man has found his strength within, and because of that, he doesn't need to make a show of it. He's not broadcasting his achievements. He's not out here trying to impress. He's simply living in alignment with his values, and that's all the validation he needs. People may see him alone and assume he's lacking, but solitude isn't emptiness for a man like this. It's richness. Solitude allows him the space to think clearly, to hear his own voice, to connect with his own spirit. In a world full of noise, solitude becomes a sanctuary, a place where he can center himself and stay true to who he is. This man has learned that his life doesn't need to be validated by likes, by followers, or by applause. He's grown wise enough to know that those things are temporary, that they come and go, and that they have no bearing on the kind of man he is or the impact he has. As Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." He's secure in the knowledge that his value is determined not by how many people notice him, but by the quality of the life he's living. He's focused on his purpose, on his goals, on the legacy he's building. And he knows that real success, real fulfillment, isn't measured in numbers or recognition. It's measured in the depth of his character, in the strength of his convictions, and in the way he carries himself through life. It takes courage to live this way, to stand apart, to be comfortable in your own skin without needing others to validate it. This man has that courage. He's not afraid of solitude because he knows that it's in those moments of quiet that he finds his true power. He doesn't need to fill his life with people just to feel whole. He's already whole. He's not out here searching for approval because he's already approved of himself. And that's a rare kind of security, a rare kind of strength. It's something that not everyone will understand. But this man, he's okay with that. He doesn't need to be understood by everyone. He's not living his life to meet others' expectations. He's living it to honor his own values, his own truth. He's secure in the knowledge that he's walking his path with integrity, and that's all the validation he needs. The strength of a man isn't determined by the size of his crowd, but by the size of his character. And this man? He's built a character that can stand alone, a character that doesn't bend to the opinions of others, a character that remains steady even in the face of solitude. In a world that constantly tries to define us, that constantly pushes us to seek approval, to fit in, to be seen, a man who's content to walk his path alone is a man who's truly free. He's free from the need for validation, free from the pressures of conformity, free from the fear of solitude. He's learned that his worth is something he defines, something he carries within himself, something that no one else can give or take away. And because of that, he's secure, he's steady, he's unbreakable. This man doesn't need friends to feel value. He doesn't need a crowd to feel secure. He's found his value within, and that's a source of strength that can't be shaken. That's the power of self-respect, the power of true security. He's a man who walks his path with quiet strength, with unwavering purpose, with a peace that can only come from within. As Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is a man who's truly secure, not because of who surrounds him, but because of who he is when he stands alone. This kind of man, he's not against having friends or forming connections, not by any means. But he understands that friendship isn't a necessity to complete him. It's an enhancement, a choice he's willing to make if it's right. if it's real. He's not out here looking for people to validate him or to fill any kind of emptiness inside, because there isn't any. He's learned to fill those spaces himself, with purpose, with principles, with a vision for his life that no one else needs to define. He's not desperate for anyone's presence because he's already made peace with his own. He knows there's strength in solitude, that sometimes the best way to get to know yourself is to be by yourself. When you take away the need for constant company, something incredible happens. You give yourself the room to breathe, to think, to reflect. You start understanding your own mind, your own motivations, your own soul. And a man like this, he's done that. He's spent time in those quiet moments, and he's discovered things about himself that he wouldn't have found if he was constantly surrounded by people. It's in those moments of silence that he's heard his own voice the clearest, that he's learned what truly drives him, what he truly values. He's seen his own reflection without any distortion, without any external influence, and he's come to know himself in ways that few people ever will. Now, he's not closed off, he's just not reliant. He's open to connection, but he's selective about who he allows close. He knows that every relationship, every person he brings into his life, brings a certain energy, a certain influence, and he's careful about that. He's not going to let just anyone in because he respects himself enough to protect his peace. He's not looking for shallow friendships or relationships built on convenience. He's not interested in being around people who only show up when everything is smooth, but disappear when things get real. If he's going to invest in someone, it's going to be meaningful. It's going to be genuine. He values depth over quantity, and if that means his circle is small, that's a choice he's more than comfortable with. Because here's the truth. This man understands that his worth isn't determined by the number of people around him. It's not about having a crowd or a big group to validate his existence. His value is found in how he lives, in the principles he stands by, in the integrity he carries within himself. He's measured by the way he respects himself, by the standards he sets, by the way he walks through life. As Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." He knows that the people who truly matter, the people who are worth his time, will recognize his worth without him having to prove it, without him having to be anyone other than who he is. And he's secure because he knows deep down that at the end of the day he's all he truly has. Friends, companions, they may come and go. People drift in and out of our lives for various reasons, but he knows that the only constant, the only person he's guaranteed to be with through every single moment is himself. So he's taken the time to get to know that person, to build a solid foundation within, to become someone he can rely on. He's not looking to others to fill that role because he's already become that for himself. Some folks will look at a man like this and think he's missing out. They'll see his solitude and mistake it for loneliness, his quiet for emptiness. They'll think he's somehow incomplete because he's not constantly surrounded by people. But what they don't realize is that he's not missing anything. He's found fulfillment within himself, a sense of wholeness that doesn't require anyone else's input. He's found a level of contentment that can't be bought, can't be given, and can't be taken away by anyone but him. And that's a level of peace that most people never find because they're too busy looking for it outside themselves. This man's contentment isn't a show. He doesn't need to flaunt it or prove it to anyone because it's not for anyone else. It's his. Something he's cultivated through his own journey, his own struggles, his own triumphs. He's been through things that have taught him the value of being able to stand on his own 2 feet, of not needing anyone else's approval to feel worthy. And through that, he's built a sense of confidence, a quiet, unshakable strength that doesn't depend on the opinions or presence of others. Because of that, He doesn't walk around with an air of arrogance. No, it's not that. It's simply that he's sure of himself. He knows who he is, what he stands for, and what he wants in life. And he's not about to compromise that for anyone. He doesn't need to bend or mold himself to fit into someone else's expectations. He doesn't need to chase after people, to prove himself, or to gain acceptance. He knows that anyone who truly values him will accept him as he is, and anyone who doesn't, well, they're simply not meant to be part of his life, and he's okay with that. This kind of man understands that true security, real strength, isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's not about being the center of attention or needing everyone to know who you are. It's about standing firm in who you are, even when no one else is watching. It's about walking a path that aligns with your values, even if it's a path you walk alone. He knows that real strength is quiet, steady, and consistent. It's not something that fades when the crowd disperses. It's something that remains, something that's built into his very character. So while others may see his solitude and misinterpret it, he knows that his peace is worth far more than the kind of friendships that demand he be anything other than who he is. He's willing to walk his path alone if that's what it takes to stay true to himself. He's not about to compromise his peace, his values, or his sense of self just to have people around him. He'd rather walk in solitude than be surrounded by people who don't truly respect him, who don't understand him, or who aren't genuine. And that's where his security comes from. It's not about having a big circle or a long list of friends. It's about having a solid sense of self, a clear understanding of his own worth. It's about knowing that he's enough, that he doesn't need anyone else's presence to feel complete. He's comfortable in his own skin. He's at peace with his own thoughts. He's content with his own company. As Epictetus said, "He who is not satisfied with a little is satisfied with nothing." This man has learned to find satisfaction and peace within himself. That's a rare strength, a kind of confidence that doesn't waver when others don't understand. People will always have opinions. They'll always have something to say, especially about things they don't understand. But this man, he doesn't live his life for the opinions of others. He's not here to make everyone else comfortable. He's here to live his truth, to honor his own path, to build a life that's meaningful to him. He knows that some people will never understand his choices, but that's okay. His life, his happiness, his peace, they're not dependent on other people's understanding. So if you see him walking alone, don't mistake it for a lack. Don't assume he's lonely or searching for something he doesn't have. He's already found it within himself. He's already built a foundation of self-respect, of integrity, of purpose. And that foundation, it's enough to carry him, enough to keep him strong, enough to keep him secure. He's not waiting for anyone to complete him because he's already whole. In the end, he's the kind of man who knows that true fulfillment doesn't come from how many people know his name or how many friends he has by his side. It comes from living a life that's authentic, a life that's true to his values, a life that reflects who he truly is. And if that means he walks alone, then so be it. He's more than prepared to do just that. He knows that his strength, his worth, his peace, they're all things he's built for himself, and they're things no one else can take away. That's real security, that's true contentment, and that's the kind of strength that lasts. There's a certain beauty in being able to walk your own path, knowing that you don't need anyone else to define you or validate you. This man, he's learned that. He's found a freedom that's rare, a freedom that only comes when you understand your own worth. See, most people go through life tied down by the need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be accepted. They're constantly looking outward, waiting for someone else to tell them they're good enough, waiting for the world to give them a sense of purpose. But this man, he's not weighed down by that need. He doesn't look to others to give him value because he already knows who he is, what he stands for, and what he's worth. That kind of freedom is powerful. It's the kind of freedom that lets you walk away from situations that don't serve you, that lets you make choices that align with your values, not someone else's expectations. He's not bound by what others think he should do or who they think he should be. He's free to be exactly who he was meant to be, and that's what real security looks like. It's not about having a crowd cheering you on. It's about knowing that even if you're the only one clapping for yourself, you're enough. It's about knowing that your life has value, even if no one else sees it. This man, he's rare because he's comfortable with solitude. He's not scared to spend time with himself, to sit in the quiet, to face his own thoughts. Most people avoid being alone because they don't like what they find there. They don't want to face their insecurities, their fears, their doubts. But this man, he's walked through all of that. He's faced his own demons, looked his fears in the eye, and come out stronger on the other side. He's discovered that the strength he needs is already within him, and he's not afraid to lean on that. In a world that's full of noise, full of distractions, full of people telling you who you should be, he's found peace in silence. He's found clarity in solitude. He's learned that sometimes the only way to really understand yourself, to truly grow, is to step away from the crowd, to take a step back from all the voices and listen to your own. He's found that peace doesn't come from having people around. It comes from knowing you can be by yourself and still be whole. That's a strength not many people have because it requires real courage to face yourself, to accept yourself, to love yourself as you are. As Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This man has found that retreat and made it his sanctuary. People might look at him and not understand. They might question why he doesn't have a big circle, why he seems so comfortable walking his own path, why he doesn't need the same things they do to feel validated. They might even judge him, label him, misunderstand him. But he's okay with that. He doesn't live his life to please others. He doesn't measure his worth by someone else's opinion. He knows that not everyone will understand his choices, and he's made peace with that. He's not looking for approval because he's already given it to himself. He's not waiting for the world to tell him he's enough because he's already decided he is. That's what makes him secure. It's not that he's cold or distant or unapproachable. It's that he's grounded. Grounded in who he is, in what he values, in the journey he's on. He doesn't need the noise, the constant validation, or the distractions. He's chosen a path that may be harder, that may be lonelier, but that's true to him. He's chosen a life that's built on self-respect, on self-awareness, on genuine strength. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not trying to be anyone he's not. He's simply being himself, and he's found a way to be at peace with that. He's chosen a life that's built on self-respect, on self-awareness, on genuine strength. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not trying to be anyone he's not. He's simply being himself, and he's found a way to be at peace with that. When you look at a man like this, you're looking at someone who has found fulfillment within himself. He's not chasing after something external, something outside of himself. He's not looking for someone else to complete him because he's already whole. He's learned to stand on his own, to rely on himself, to be his own source of strength. And that, right there, is rare. It's a quiet kind of strength, a strength that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to be validated by others. It simply is. This man knows that true fulfillment doesn't come from having a crowd around you, a list of accomplishments, or a bank of followers. It comes from within, and that is a strength that lasts. True fulfillment comes from living a life that is authentic to who you are, It comes from knowing that you are walking a path that is meaningful, that you're living a life that reflects your values, and that you're being true to yourself. And he's committed to that. He's committed to living a life he can be proud of, a life that, even in the quietest moments, feels right to him. He understands that not everyone will appreciate his journey. Not everyone will understand the choices he's made or the path he's walking. But that's okay. He's not here to be understood by everyone. He's here to live his truth, to honor his own path, to build a life that resonates with him, a life that, when he looks back, he can say was truly his. At the end of the day, he knows he's the one who has to live with his choices. He's the one who has to look in the mirror and be at peace with the person staring back at him. That's why he's secure, why he's grounded, because he's built his life on a foundation of self-respect, integrity, and purpose. He doesn't need anyone else to validate that. He doesn't need the world to tell him he's on the right track, because he already knows he is. He's listened to his own voice, followed his own heart, and he's confident in the path he's chosen. He's not out here looking for validation, because he's already found it within himself. And when you find a man like that, you're looking at someone who's truly free. Free from the need for approval, free from the fear of judgment, free from the limitations others try to place on him. He's free to be exactly who he is, to walk his path, to live his life. That's a freedom most people never find because they're too busy trying to fit into a mold, too worried about what others think. But this man, he's broken free from all of that. He's living a life that's true to him, a life that's authentic, a life that, even in moments of solitude, feels complete. It takes courage to walk this path, to choose a life that doesn't depend on the opinions of others. It takes strength to look within, to find your own worth, to know that you are enough. And this man, he's done that work. He's found that courage, embraced that strength, and it's led him to a place of true peace. He knows who he is, and he's okay with being that person, even if no one else understands. He's okay with walking alone, with choosing solitude over shallow connections, with valuing himself over the validation of others. So, if you see him walking alone, don't assume he's lacking something. Don't think he's missing out. He's found something most people spend their whole lives searching for. He's found himself. He's found a sense of worth that isn't tied to anyone else, a sense of peace that doesn't depend on someone else's presence. He's whole, he's complete, and he's living a life that's true to who he is. That's real freedom, that's real security, and that's the kind of strength that can't be shaken. This man understands that life isn't about how many people surround you or how much approval you receive. It's about the quality of your journey and the integrity with which you live it. He knows that the depth of your character is what truly matters, not the size of your audience. He's the kind of man who will leave a legacy, not because of how many people knew him, but because of the way he lived his life. He'll be remembered for his integrity, for his strength, and for his commitment to himself. He'll be remembered as a man who walked his own path, who wasn't afraid to be alone, and who valued himself enough to be true to who he was. And that's the kind of legacy that lasts. A man with no friends isn't a man who's lacking. He's a man who's found something deeper, something more enduring. He's found himself. And that, my friends, is a powerful thing. Because when you are secure in who you are, when you've made peace with your own company, there's nothing you can't face. There's nothing that can shake you. You're grounded, you're steady, you're whole. And that, right there, is what it means to be truly secure. This kind of strength doesn't come easy. It requires a willingness to confront your fears, your insecurities, your doubts. It demands that you face the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid, the pieces you'd rather hide. But once you've done that, once you've stared your demons in the eye and embraced every part of who you are, you find a strength that cannot be taken away. This man has walked that path. He spent countless moments in solitude, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He chose to get to know himself, to understand his own mind, his own motivations, his own soul. He knows what drives him, he knows what he values, and he knows what he stands for. He doesn't fear being alone because he's discovered the beauty of his own company. He's found that in the silence, there's clarity. In the solitude, there's peace. And in the stillness, there's strength. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This man embodies that wisdom. He's taken control of his own mind, his own narrative, and his own worth. He's chosen to live a life that's true to him, regardless of what others may think. People may not understand him. They may misjudge him or label him, but he doesn't let that sway him. He doesn't live his life to please others. He doesn't measure his worth by someone else's standards. He's made peace with the fact that not everyone will understand his choices, and that's okay. What matters to him is that his life is his own, that his choices reflect his values, that his path is one he can walk with integrity. When you look at a man like this, you're looking at someone who has found fulfillment, not in external validation, but within himself. He's found a sense of worth that cannot be given or taken away by anyone else. He's found a peace that comes from knowing he is enough. That's real freedom, that's real security, and that's a kind of strength that lasts a lifetime. In the end, this man isn't afraid to walk alone, not because he doesn't want connection, but because he knows he doesn't need it to feel complete. His journey is his own, and he walks it with courage, with purpose, and with an unwavering sense of self. And that, my friends, is the essence of a truly secure man.